Back in December of 2020, Pfizer announced the world's first COVID-19 vaccine to the world. Now, most of the world was excited at the possibility of finally being able to go back outside and stay protected against the virus. However, there was also another small portion of the world that was terrified at the idea of a new virus that had little to no testing and was already being used on healthcare workers. I was a part of this small percentage. At that time, I had been on social media trying to learn more about the vaccine, but the information I found there was less than accurate. I found information that told me that the vaccine was responsible for the new spike in cases that month, and that it would soon be responsible for new mutations in the virus. And because I didn't know any better, I believed in all of these claims. And this went on for a few weeks, until my parents decided that it was time for them to get the vaccine as well. And this terrified me initially because I wasn't sure what would happen to them. I thought they might get COVID or worse. But after a few days of them being completely fine, I realized that there was no stock to these rumors. It was then that I realized that I had been misinformed by social media. Now, before I go any further, I'd like to clarify what I mean by misinformation. Misinformation just simply refers to false information. It can spread through a variety of ways, like word of mouth and the internet. Now, whatever your misconceptions are about misinformation, the truth is that it is dangerous. Just over the past year, misinformation has resulted in various hate crimes against Asian Americans, refusal to take the vaccine, and earlier in January of 2021, the raid on the US Capitol. Now, what I've learned from these incidents of the past year, as well as my own, is that misinformation has a way of sneaking right under our noses without us even realizing it. But if you really think about it, this shouldn't be the issue that it is. I mean, we've all heard the anecdote that we have to be more careful of what we read online and more careful of the information that we take in. But still, to this day, 32% of Americans don't believe that climate change is an active threat to their community. And still, 1 in 5 Americans refuse to take the vaccine. So why is it that misinformation is obviously the big problem that it is? Well, the answer lies in the fact that only a small percentage of people on the internet actually pay attention to what they're reading. To help you understand what I mean by this, let me run you through an example. So imagine it's Monday morning and you're about to get ready for your day. So while you wait for your coffee or your bus to show up, you decide to take out your phone for a couple minutes and just scroll through social media. Now, most of the stuff you see is just your standard fare. You have a couple of cat videos, you have a couple of influencers posting about their lives, then off to the side, you have a couple news pieces of information. And then, with these pieces of information, they don't really give you the full story. They give you maybe just a quick snippet of the news. And there's really no way for us as consumers to tell which of these are true and which of these are false, since they're all lumped together. And because of this, we just take it all in as fact. And this right here is how misinformation sneaks into our lives. Another major issue is the source that we get our information from. Whether we all realize it or not, we all have different biases towards different sources, and this directly impacts the way we perceive information. For instance, if I were to receive false information from a source that I believe to be true, then I'll be more likely to believe the information because it comes from a source that I think is credible. Another thing I'd like to point out is that we as people tend to trust information that looks and seems credible. And this just comes from taking in information from sources that appear credible. So we just put 2 and 2 together and assume that any information that looks credible probably is. But what's important to note is that anyone who has enough time and malicious intent can make any piece of information seem trustworthy and credible while still lying directly to your face. So, that being said, I'd like to talk about the immense impact that social media has in today's world of news. In fact, A study done by Pew Research found that every 1 in 5 Americans, that's 20% of the entire American population, uses social media as their source of information. In fact, only 8% of that 20% actively follow the news, meaning they do more than just look at the information, absorb it, and scroll away. All of this being said, I'd like to discuss a couple of my solutions that I use to keep myself protected from social media. The first thing that I do is that when I'm online, I tend to avoid social media as my source of information. Instead, just stick to credited news organizations like maybe the BBC or NPR. Now, this isn't 100% foolproof, but this is a lot safer than using random people on the internet as your source of information. The next thing that I do is when I eventually find news on social media, because it's guaranteed to happen at some point or another, what I do is I come in with a bit of a different mindset. What I do is I like to think this information isn't telling me the whole story. Maybe there's another side that I'm not getting. And what this does is allows me to stay more open to all sides of the story while still allowing me to be informed. Now, social media has become very ingrained into our lives. And with that comes loads of misinformation. And that's always going to exist. There's always going to be someone out there who's trying to mislead you. In order to combat this, it's important that we all stay properly informed on the internet. But it's more important that we don't just take what we see at face value. Just taking an extra second to decide for yourself whether the information you're seeing is even true or not can help prevent you from being misled. Thank you.